Tingle, a strange little man dressed in a green bodysuit whose dream is to become a fairy. Sure, he's weird on the surface, but it gets darker the deeper we go. But is it really his fault? Tingle is first introduced as Tingle in Majora's Mask. You need him to help you decode maps so you can figure out how to get around in Termina to the different regions. His role in Wind Waker is similar. In Wind Waker, Tingle is needed to decipher the Triforce charts, which is a required part of the game. For now, let's take a look at Majora's Mask. Some players might just think that he's a strange little character that the designers were having fun with while developing Majora's Mask. But here's where it gets dark. So Tingle is dressed in a green tunic just like Link, because he actually believes he is a forest fairy, or at the very least, he really wants to be one. The Majora's Mask guidebook says that he's a 35-year-old man, so we know that much. That alone covers the creep aspect of him. Let's go back to Wind Waker. Here we go. In Wind Waker, you meet Tingle very early on in the game. You find him in a prison? Well, I always knew he was a little bit of a strange guy. Actually, I have a theory that sort of explains one reason why he could be in prison, which is linked above and below. Basically, you have to bust him out and he'll give you the Tingle Tuner. He also tells you about his island, where he helps you with decoding maps and such. But actually, let's go back to the prison part. There is a little tunnel behind a box that leads to the black and white pictograph, which is necessary to upgrade to the color one and is used in numerous side quests. There are tablets inside a chamber of the tunnel with what can be assumed to be Tingle's deranged words inscribed on them. But the weird part is the room itself. Inside, there are two spiderwebs on the ceiling that seem to be watching you everywhere you are in the room. Maybe I'm reading too far into a good room design, but what about those skulls? What are those about? There wasn't anyone else locked up in there with him, was there? I'm not so sure if letting this man out was a good idea, and to make it even spookier, all the skulls are facing toward the middle of the room, where the chest and the pictograph are. Perhaps Tingle has led more travelers to their demise in this room, stuck in a maze forever, unable to find their way out, leaving nothing but their skulls behind as a trophy for their killer. Moving on, I don't want to think about the fact that I released a serial killer back into the Great Sea. When you talk to him, he calls you a fairy boy. Maybe this is because of your green clothes, but what about the blue tunic? How does he know that Link is a fairy? Also, the Wind Waker takes place on a separate timeline than Majora's Mask, making it even weirder. Tingle didn't appear in the Ocarina of Time, but if he was in Majora's Mask, and all the characters there were counterparts to characters from Ocarina of Time, then it would be logical to assume that Tingle was in fact there during Ocarina of Time, somewhere hidden behind the scenes. Which means he would know about Link and the Kokiri. The reason I bring this up is that the Link in Wind Waker doesn't know about the Kokiri, so why would Tingle bring that up? As far as we know, fairy children aren't a thing and Tingle doesn't know that much. One more thing, Tingle enslaves his family. In the Wind Waker, when visiting his island, it's obvious that the four of the people up in his tower are related. Tingle, Ankle, Knuckle, and David Jr. They all look exactly alike except for a few minor differences. Their clothes, their faces, and their clock pendants are all similar. Talking to them, you find out that Tingle is their older brother, and they apparently don't like the labor they're forced to do. So yeah, he bullies and enslaves his younger brothers. After all that, what have we learned? Not enough, I'd say. So let's keep going back to his mom and dad. After all, a person's upbringing can tell a lot about them. Let's start with Pops. You meet his dad, who I guess we're just assuming is a Hylian in Majora's Mask as well, who is a guide at the Swamp Center. He's hairy, very large, and a lot more manly looking than Tingle himself. The only info we get from him is that Tingle is his son and he's ashamed of the way he turned out. As for his mother, she's never actually mentioned. She's probably dead, murdered, or just left town because of a rocky relationship with her wacky family. I wouldn't blame her for that. And in a game called Tingle's Rosy Rupee Land, which by the way is non-canonical, I'm just using it as further evidence, we meet someone who claims to be Tingle's uncle, who's basically a flesh-colored rupee, and swindles him out of millions of rupees. I guess that could mess up a kid too. So Tingle comes from a broken home where his mother left home sometime early on, and he was kicked out and forced to live with his uncle since his father was equally ashamed of him and torn from his broken relationship. There were 3 other sons who in turn were also abused by Tingle because of his messed up relationship with his uncle, which involved a lot of deceit and abuse. Tingle is disillusioned from his past. To cope with his traumatizing past, he seeks a better way of life, being a fairy. He'll do anything to anyone to achieve his ultimate goal of being a fairy, including steal, enslave his brothers, and even murder those who try to get in his way. But who really is to blame here, him or his upbringing? His family was certainly horrible, but does that justify his behavior? Drop a comment down below. Anyway, it's all somewhat speculative in the end, and we are once again left to imagine for ourselves what truly happened.